day to your children. If for 6 days they see in their parents an eager anticipation of the seventh day, then the seventh day will not be a strange day to them. I remember when I was teaching in a church school, we used to have the parents' evening, and we talk about their work and all this thing, and all these things. And I remember some parents coming in one day and saying, well, our daughter doesn't want to come to church on a Sunday. Oh, why is that? Do you read the scripture with her? Do you pray with her? Do you talk about the things of God with her in her presence? Oh no. Surprise, surprise. What do you expect? Then the seventh day becomes a punishment day. It's just different. And they're not used to it, and they're not accustomed to it. And so we have this great responsibility to keep the meaning and the memory of the Lord's Day alive. So that's remembering in the sense of not forgetting, but then the word remember is also used in the sense of to observe something, to keep the Sabbath. So you've got this positive aspect to it. And you observe the Sabbath in two ways. There's the negative way of ceasing from labor, and we notice how comprehensive that command is, how extensive it is, how inclusive it is, and I'm going to talk about that in a few moments, so I'll say nothing more at this point. But also, we keep the Sabbath by gathering for worship. Oh, did it say that in the commandment? No, it didn't. No, it didn't. But when you read Leviticus 23, verses 1 to 3, you understand what the Sabbath is for. It's not for working, that's for sure. These are the appointed feasts of the Lord, that you shall proclaim as a holy convocation. They are my appointed feasts. The seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. What's a convocation? Well, it's a gathering. It's a gathering. A gathering for a purpose. And this is a holy convocation. And so the Lord is saying through Leviticus here that the Sabbath day is to be kept by gathering at a meeting convened by God himself. It's the Sabbath of the Lord your God. It's a holy convocation. And we are to proclaim those holy convocations among us. A gathering convened by God. Well, now that's rather unique in this world, isn't it? To go to a meeting. Are you going to a meeting tonight? Yes. What's it about? Oh, it's a photography meeting. Take it or leave it. I'm going to a meeting tonight. What sort of meeting? Oh, it's one called by God. Unique. Amazing. Called by God. It's a holy convocation. He has invited us to come. He has invited us to come. Who's going to miss out? Who, receiving a royal invitation, will not turn up to the palace? And that was the habit of the Christians. Of course, that Sabbath day shifted the day, and it became the first day of the week. But we know that on the first day of the week, that is exactly what they did. That was the custom, that was the practice of the early church. 1 Corinthians 16:2, on the first day of every week, says Paul, each of you is to put something aside and store it up as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come. In other words, when you gather for worship, take a collection. Take an offering. And in Acts 20, you remember the story of Eutychus who fell asleep because Paul preached a long one? Acts 20, verse 7, on the first day of the week, when we were gathered together to break bread. That was the custom. That was the practice of the early church. On the first day of the week, what did they do? They observed a holy convocation. This was a time for collective worship, collective adoration, collective praise, collective hearing of God's word. So, remember the Sabbath in its two senses. Don't forget it and keep it. Secondly, we come to the positive prohibition in the commandment. On it, you shall not do any work. Deuteronomy 5:13. And the first thing you notice, as I mentioned earlier, is the comprehensiveness or the inclusiveness of that command. We are struck by its almost universality. Everything must rest. Everything must acknowledge God. This is a true creation ordinance. Even the animals must be allowed to rest. So you have the entire household, and you remember in those days that a household was generally much bigger than our little nuclear families are today, where in which the family has kind of disintegrated and fined down to very few in number. Here you've got an extended family that's inclusive of servants and other hired people and even strangers and sojourners among them. And so, in a sense, the whole economy shut down on that day. How different it is today. We noticed in our first sermon in this series how difficult society makes Sabbath observance. It's exceedingly difficult. And I don't think we should bury our head in the sand and pretend that people don't have problems, real problems about this. They do. The effect of industrialization, the profit motive, and so on, has distorted everything. But in the command, it is a comprehensive shutdown. No work to be done by anyone. And that reflects its origins in the creation, in the fact that God rested from all his works. So that's the first thing, its comprehensiveness. The second thing we notice about the command is its perpetuity. That is, its continuity. Exodus 31:13, it is a sign between me and you through your generations. It's a bit like the language of the covenant. You know, I will be God to you and your descendants after you. But now it's become an obligation of the covenant, and we are to remember it throughout our generations. We're going to look at this in more detail on another occasion, God willing. But what it does for the moment is challenge us to prevent the Sabbath becoming history. Remember it throughout your generations. I was talking to somebody earlier today about my recollection of the Second War. I was very, very young. But I can remember the planes flying over South Wales and the gun batteries firing off the anti-aircraft gun batteries. And that's just a fragment of a memory that I have from when I was very young. When I tell those stories to my children, that's history to them. It's no longer reality. It's true, but it's not, in a sense, real to them. And their children will be even that much more remote from it. And so, what Scripture is doing by saying that this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations is that somehow or other, by the means that I suggested earlier in the sermon, we have to keep this alive and prevent it from becoming just history, just a custom from the past. So, there's its comprehensiveness, its perpetuity, and its seriousness. How serious is this? Exodus 31:14 and 15. It's very serious. Notice the stringent application here. Whoever does any work on it shall be cut off from his people. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath shall be put to death. Serious? Very serious. Now, it's easy to get hung